Everyone. It's such a pleasure to see everyone here this evening. It's always a good sign when we have to get out more chairs, yeah? My name is Jennifer Anderson. I teach creative nonfiction, publishing arts, and composition at LC State, and I'm also the faculty advisor for Talking River Review, our college's student-run literary journal, which is celebrating our 31st year of publication. This is LC State's 44th annual Stegner Lecture. This lecture, established in 1982 with Wallace Stegner as the inaugural speaker, has long been a literary and cultural highlight for the college and the larger Lewiston-Clarkston community, featuring discussions about the writer's relationship with the physical and psychological territories in which they reside. Past speakers have included Edward Abbey, Norman McLean, Linda Hogan, Terry Tempest Williams, Robert Wrigley, Natalie Diaz, Kim Barnes, Elizabeth Bradfield, and C. Marie Furman. Tonight, we are so honored to feature Derek Sheffield. In preparation for Derek Sheffield's visit to campus and for tonight's event, over 100 students from various classes at LC State studied Cascadia Field Guide, which is for sale at the back of the room. A stunning text co-edited by Derek Sheffield, C. Marie Furman, and Elizabeth Bradfield, winner of the 2024 Pacific Northwest Book Award. Cascadia Field Guide brings together art, poetry, and stories holding scientific, sensory, and cultural knowledge to celebrate and illuminate Cascadia, the diverse ecoregion stretching from Alaska's Prince William Sound to Northern California and from the Pacific Coast to the Continental Divide. And it's one of the most beautiful books I've seen in a long time. And if you haven't gotten a copy, I really suggest you go back and get one. As a way to further connect with this text, our students have created a field guide of their own, the Lewis-Clark Valley Field Guide, which is also at the back of the room. This was truly a collaborative venture that celebrates the work of students in many different classes at Lewis-Clark State College, all working in various ways to share qualities of the LC Valley with our readers. Our more than 100 contributors represent a diverse set of programs and majors at the college. There is work from Corinza Allison's Introduction to Native American Studies class, my creative nonfiction writing class, Marlo Daly Galeano's Western American Literature class, Kelsey Grafton's Introduction to Art, Drawing, Painting, and Ceramics classes, Kimberly Tolson's Writing and Rhetoric 2 classes, as well as work from the students of Professors Liz Martin and Brian Kolstad. This guide was edited by students in my Talking River Review Publishing Arts class, and I'd like to give a special shout out to Bailey Kinsley, sitting right over there, the TRR intern and graphic communications major who worked tirelessly to design our guide. Tonight we are thrilled to share the Lewis-Clark Valley Field Guide with all of you here. You'll find these books at the back of the room. There is no set price, but we are accepting donations. All donations will be deposited into the Talking River Review account, which is what funded production of our beautiful book. We will happily accept cash or check, and we also have a card reader that can accept donations by debit or credit. I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Humanities Division for their generous help with and support of tonight's event, specifically the Visiting Writer Committee, Marlo Daly Galeano and Louis Sylvester. I'd also like to thank our Administrative Assistant, Leilani Farrell, our Division Chair, Amanda Van Lannen, Liberal Arts and Sciences Dean, Martin Gibbs, Brian Kolstad, and his graphic communications student, Ryan Corelli, who designed the poster for this event. Thanks to Lawrence Sanders in Communications and Marketing for recording the lecture, which will be posted to the Humanities Division's YouTube channel at a later date. And finally, thank you to Lynn Johnson, Director of the Lewiston City Library, and her staff for lending us this lovely space for tonight's event. This community event was also made possible by an LC State Institutional Development Grant, as well as by a generous contribution from the Rose Hill Fund. I am now going to turn it over to Lynessa Watkins, a publishing arts major at LC State, who is triple minoring in professional writing, creative writing, and Spanish. She will introduce tonight's lecturer. Following the lecture, there will be time for questions. Derek also has some of his books for sale in the back of the room, which I'm sure he will be happy to sign for you. Please join me in welcoming Lynessa Watkins.
Good evening. I would like to welcome you all to the 44th Annual Stegner Lecture. Tonight I have the honor of introducing this year's visiting writer, Derek Sheffield. Mr. Sheffield's work mainly consists of poetry, but he also acted as a co-editor for Cascadia Field Guide, along with two previous Stegner lecturers, Elizabeth Bradfield in 2020 and C. Marie, who is also here this evening, in 2023. Additionally, Sheffield co-edited Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. He's published two original collections, Through the Skin and Not for Luck, as well as many other standalone pieces. His work is highly acclaimed, with multiple awards and numerous finalist honors to his name, and he's currently serving as the 8th Poet Laureate of Washington State. Furthermore, his poems have been accepted in, frankly, too many literary journals to name, including a fantastic set of poems that Talking River Review had the honor of publishing in our spring 2025 issue. Mr. Sheffield was born in Portland, Oregon, and grew up in the Pacific Northwest. He earned an MFA from the University of Washington, and in addition to writing poetry, he teaches English at Wenatchee Valley College. Derek Sheffield's first poetry book, Through the Second Skin, includes poems written over the course of a decade that explored the Northwest region he grew up in. It's a collection that is deeply intertwined with nature and how we experience it. It's reflective, emotionally resonant, and mature in both tone and technique. Many reviewers praised the collection for its versatility, lyrical descriptions, and complexity. Additionally, the collection was a finalist for the 2014 Washington State Book Award and runner-up for the 2012 Emily Dickinson First Book Award. Mr. Sheffield's second poetry collection, Not for Luck, has a similar emphasis on nature, as Sheffield explores the Northwest, his relationship with his children, and the world they will inherit. Not for Luck manages to be both deeply personal and universally resonant. It's a collection that speaks to his skill and, above all, his love of and connection to the natural world. Not for Luck was the poetry collection I purchased and read in preparation for this event. I was inspired to seek out more of Derek Sheffield's work after reading and discussing the poems he submitted to Talking River Review. As I quickly found out during my time working for TRR, we receive a lot of poetry. While we receive many amazing poems, I find that only a few truly connect with me personally. Mr. Sheffield's was the first submission where every poem managed to strike a chord with me in some way. While reading Not for Luck, I was impressed with Mr. Sheffield's ability to draw fascinating parallels between people and nature. We often think of ourselves as separate from the natural world, but Mr. Sheffield blends nature seamlessly with the human experience. In a poem titled Her Calling, he writes, "May she keep herself the way a shell cupped to an ear, no matter how far or broken, never lets go of the ocean." He is also a master of creating subtle connections through language, letting readers in without feeling imposing. Much of the poetry in this collection feels like a conversation, as if by reading and connecting with these poems, we too are creating something. It's one of the unique strengths of Mr. Sheffield's poetry, the ability to draw the reader in. For example, in his poem, Exactly What Needs Saying, he writes, "It keeps going. This hiding behind the sweeping and wiping, this acting as if the crumbs you might scatter or the dirt on your shoes is what matters." I often found myself reflecting on these pieces days after I read them, thinking about the language, the story, and the theme. I, like many others, struggle to understand poetry, to read through the lines and see what lies beneath. But Mr. Sheffield's poems contain such clear and resonant emotion. Even if I am missing some subtleties or lost among the beautiful language, I can still feel the heart of his work. This, I believe, is the mark of a great poet. Now, without further ado, it is my absolute honor to introduce you to this year's Stegner lecturer, Derek Sheffield.
Do you know how?
Okay. Is it off? Is it off? No.
I don't think it's off.
There we go. Okay. Wow. Oh, Lanessa. Can we just end there? That, as we were talking earlier in the publication class, Jennifer's publication class that produces Talking River Review, the gift that you give someone to read their work so closely and give that much of yourself to it, to be the reader that the work requires, is the best thing of all. It's what I think we're seeking, that kind of connection. So to hear from you is really special. Thank you so much for those words. And I want to thank again Jennifer and Marlo and Kelsey and Kimberly and all the great colleagues at the college that made the most extraordinary response to Cascadia Field Guide that we have come across since it was published. Was it 2.5 years ago now? We know it's a text at many places that we've heard from, and we've visited different classrooms here and there, but what these students and faculty did in making and publishing their own field guide for the Lewis-Clark Valley is just exactly the kind of thing that we were hoping would happen. So it's a real another gift. Thank you for that. And also thank you to the library. This is my first time here. What an extraordinary place. Chief Joseph there. Oh, what was it? Was it Thunder Rising Toward Distant Mountains? His native name? It's been a while since I've read. Yeah, I think that was it. And then the machinery out there. So I got to tell you that environmentalism is a dirty word. It implies that the natural world is like a stage upon which we act. It is painted scenery in the background. But no, what does it actually mean to live in place? In fact, of course, our place is us and we are it. We are beautifully and utterly entangled with our home. Perhaps this is why Wendell Berry advises that our task is to figure out what our place requires of us and be that. Even though it may be hard to understand and something we can't quite see, we are here in the way tree roots are here. We are the roots and the soil is Mother Earth. Now think about how roots are connected to soil and other roots by way of mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae, the combination of the words myco, meaning fungus, and rhiza, meaning root, literally meaning fungus root. Think about all those rootlets, fine as the hair of the fuzz on a boy's first mustache. Or the little hairs that start growing on your ears as you enter your 50s. Maybe not so fine, actually, a little prickly. Threading around and through and between the roots, the soil, the water, the biotic and abiotic brought together. We are, each of us, a weave, and we know that the biotic community inside of us, all the little critters, for example, living in our guts, is woven with the community outside of us. Though even the distinction between the biotic and abiotic might be porous, maybe not perhaps in a materialist worldview, a purely scientific one, but in maybe another way of being here. Some things, say the wise ones, who know everything, are not living. I say, you live your life your way and leave me alone. I have talked with the faint clouds in the sky when they are afraid of being left behind. I have said, hurry, hurry, and they have said, thank you, we are hurrying. About cows and starfish and roses, there is no argument. They die, after all. But water is a question. So many living things in it. But what is it itself? Living or not? Oh, gleaming generosity, how can they write you out? As I think this, I am sitting on the sand beside the harbor. I am holding in my hand small pieces of granite, pyrite, schist, each one just now so thoroughly asleep. Thanks to Mary Oliver for that poem. And because they are alive, that means you can eat them. Or so my daughter Zoe once thought. When C. Marie Furman and Elizabeth Bradfield and I made Cascadia Field Guide, we avoided it like a bad case of COVID. And when I say it, I mean the word it. It is another dirty word. Instead of it, there are he and she and they. Can poems change the world? Why, yes, of course, because language changes the world. And poetry is the most powerful kind of language that I know of. Think about how we kill each other with words long before the bullets fly. Epithets lead to bayonets. A curse makes way for a shiv. The first peoples here were called savages by some of the first Europeans, and the Nazis compared Jewish people to rats. It, I believe, does the same kind of work. My daughter's name, Zoe, means, of course, life. What does it mean? That's the question. What does it mean to be living in a world of its? To help answer this question, I want to share a poem with you that was born just a few miles down from here along the Snake River. A good fish. Jerk that bitch, urges my guide, and I give my shuddering pole a jerk, hooking the throat of the first steelhead of my life. Reel 'em, he mutters, and revs the motor. I horse my pole and reel and horse. The boat's mascot whines, her claws clicking. Let it take some line. My father, uncle, and cousin are reeling. First fish, they shout. And I shout, what a fighter! A silver spine touches the air. There, he points, a hen. And guess what? She's going to join the club. Somehow spotting in that glimpse the smooth place along her back where a fin had been snipped. He leans over the gunwale, dips a net, and scoops her into the boat. She is thick with a wide band of fiery scales, slapping the aluminum bottom. Welcome to the club, he says, and clobbers her once, and again, and once more before she goes still. A bleeder, he says, shaking his head and handing her to me. I curl a finger through a gill the way you're supposed to, determined not to let her slip and flop back to the river. A blunder I'd never live down. A good fist. Fish, I mean. A good fish. I was supposed to be part of this club that I was in on that boat, but nothing about that felt right. How you take a life matters. When Jane Goodall first started turning in her batches of data from her observations of the chimpanzees in Tanzania, she, instead of using numbers to refer to individuals, she gave them names. And instead of calling them it, she said he and she and they. And her science was kicked back. No. We need some objectivity here. Get some numbers, get some its in there. And yet, of course, Jane Goodall was right. She showed them, and she showed us all. She ended up changing the very definition of humanity through her work when she observed the chimpanzee she'd named David Graybeard fashioning a tool from a twig to fish for termites. The more we learn about our fellow animals, the less alone we become. But how had this behavior not been observed before? I wonder, and this is a real question, would Jane have been able to see this if she had been a trained scientist like the others who'd been out there? If she hadn't just been a young girl who'd fallen in love with the natural world because of reading those Tarzan books? Would she have been able to see this behavior if she had been looking at it instead of him, instead of David? Years back, I lived along this creek, and my neighbor would always, every spring, come out. They were kind of seasonal residents. They'd come out to the property, and they would start mowing and whacking and hacking and mowing, and it was painful for me. And also there was a setback to the creek. You weren't really supposed to be doing that. But I don't know, it's their property and so forth, and you don't want to make enemies with your neighbors, because that can get really hard. And so then one day I was over there, I was talking to Chris, and I happened to look down over here, and oh my, but you have Brown's peony. You have Brown's peony growing in your meadow. Are you kidding me? Chris, do you know how rare this is? This is one of 2 peonies in North America. This is the only one we have around here. I never see this. They're so cool. Like, feel them. Oh my gosh, look at these waxy leaves and look at these colors. And I introduced Chris to Brown's peony in that way. And this is how I get when I'm around beings like Brown's peony. I get excited. I can't help it. And after that, I noticed that Chris, he really stopped mowing this whole section, because he got to know just a little bit Brown's peony. Robin Wall Kimmerer, a Potawatomi tribal member and doctor of botany, is a living fusion of indigenous and Western ways of knowing. She writes about using the pronouns ki, singular, and kin, plural, for non-human living things to help us shift our perspective from treating nature as an it to recognizing nature as our family. Key is borrowed from an Anishinaabe concept and word for beings of the living earth. This is the grammar of animacy. This is the antidote to it. Our language must change so we can change. And yes, there are poems in here, and yes, there's art in here in this Cascadia Field Guide, but really the paradigm shift that's embodied in this book takes place in its structure, in the language, in the organization. Robin's work influenced us greatly. What if we lived on, with? What if we lived with a living earth? Here's a little poem that my co-creator, my amazing co-creator, C. Marie Furman, made for this book, because we couldn't find a poem for cryptobiotic soil. So she made this poem. And it's called Cryptobiotic Sonnet. The ashes of my beloved tasted like nothing, and swallowing them didn't bring him back. They still feel warm, my mother said, as we fed him to the river. He and I were pregnant then, but I bled the unknowable into soil. There were no songs. I often walked the desert looking for proof of my ancestors. I once found a Clovis point unbroken by years, cattle hooves or floods, an icicle with an amber heart and tip dipped in blood. I felt only its primeval edge when I pressed it to my tongue. I buried the artifice in soil whose name means hidden life. An ancient skin which binds together the dead in layers to hold new lives. I'll be dead before the scar I made heals by the beautiful work of rot, which I carry now beneath my fingernails like 10 black and waning moons. As the poem tells us, cryptobiotic means hidden life. What would it look like if you and I lived as if life were hiding all around us in plain sight? One of the great human ambassadors for the love of life was poet Walt Whitman. This uniquely American ecstatic poet was an agent of poetry's evolution to organic verse. Here's a passage of such from his masterwork, Song of Myself. A child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green woven stuff. Or I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrancer designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name some way in the corners that we may see and remark and say, whose? Or I guess the grass is itself a child, the produced babe of the vegetation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic, and it means sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones. So even if we go beyond it and think of peony and grass and salmon and David, what do we really have in a name? Sometimes we stop at taxonomy, thinking that the name of a thing is knowing a thing. Names are not knowledge. They are, in my experience, primarily hangers upon which to drape our knowing. Or perhaps they are the handles of the luggage of lore we accumulate. They are a small part of being in relationship, but they do help. There was a time when I first started teaching, and my first year teaching, it was hard. I thought, what have I done to myself? I can't do this for another 30 years. I just have to get through this year. And then, maybe I can go into business. And I was living in Gig Harbor, and I was living at the base of this tall cliff on the Salish Sea. And there was a little old cabin down there, a boat cabin that had been converted to a living cabin, just a one-room little cabin. And I was the only one down there at the base of this cliff, the Salish Sea, Mount Rainier, and it was so close, waves would splash up, hit the tip of the deck and splash up over the sliding glass door that was my entrance. I started off, and I was a kid, I was a product of suburbia, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know anyone. I knew crow, and I knew seagull. I know. There were all these birds out there, and I had no idea who they were. But even with seagull, I was a little bit off, because if seagulls live by the sea, what do you call a gull that lives by the bay? A bagel. Thank you. Thank you. He gets one of the door prizes. Okay. Can I get more cowbell in the mic while we're at it? So I didn't have any TV. I didn't have any cable TV. I was trying to save money to pay off my student loans. I was alone. I was learning how to teach. Well, hold on. I wasn't quite alone. The pigeon guillemot. Odd, sooty children raise me through morning shades, with their seeking and hiding along the wave-stilled beach, whistling out their shrill, stretched necks. Glissading down on stubby, white-specked wings, sun-slipped from cliff and crevice, they assemble for the chase, balance on driftwood, and squeal like a circus of thinnest balloons. Jesus walked. These fowls sprint, orange feet splattering a rippled runway into flight. They wobble among rocks, peek from the chop, and plumply pipe the weather before lighting to their daily fish. I turn to the verse of their wakes, mark the ink of their plumes as they dive, saved by each clownish foot. My neighbor was a colony of pigeon guillemots. I hope my poem conveys to you how essential they were to me, those birds. And there were many others, as I said, that I didn't know, but I began to know. My sister sent me a pair of binoculars in the mail. I bought my first field guide of Western birds. And this was the pre-digital world. And I set about getting to know my neighbors, all these birds who, they didn't go away in the winter. They stay there in the winter. Oh, thank you. It's so gray and so bleak and so wet. It's not beautiful like here. I mean, it's just wet and gray. And I looked out, and there were all these there was grebe and loon and cormorant and scoter and harlequin duck and just all these gorgeous, amazing seabirds that wintered there with me that year. And I wondered, and I learned there, I watched, I looked them up, I watched, I looked them up, and that's how I started, that was how a big part of who I became now, who I am. That was a big step. And and I think about it now, I think about who I was then and who I am now, and I still can't quite understand how I was so blind, how I was so deaf to everything out there, everyone, all. I was like, how would I never noticed this before? The transformation that these birds were hatching in me was nothing short of what happened to hunter, naturalist, and scientist Aldo Leopold let him tell the story. It's a passage from his essay, Thinking Like a Mountain. We were eating lunch on a high rim rock at the foot of which a turbulent river elbowed its way. We saw what we thought was a doe fording the current, her breast awash in white water. When she climbed the bank towards us and shook out her tail, we realized our error. It was a wolf. A half dozen others, evidently grown pups, sprang from the willows and all joined in a welcoming melee of wagging tails and playful maulings. What was literally a pile of wolves writhed and tumbled in the center of an open flat at the foot of our rim rock. In those days, we had never heard of a passing up a chance to kill a wolf. In a second, we were pumping lead into the pack, but with more excitement than accuracy. How to aim a steep downhill shot is always confusing. When our rifles were empty, the old wolf was down and a pup was dragging a leg into impassable side rocks. We reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in her eyes. I realized then, and have known ever since, that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I was young then and full of trigger itch. I thought that because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean a hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. This experience led Leopold to articulate what we now think of as the land ethic. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. That simple. As I left the Salish Sea and moved to the east side of the Cascades, I thought, oh yeah, it's just the seabirds. It's just the guillemots and those loons, and I won't do it. And I'm not going to be interested in perching birds. There was this whole section in my guide, perching birds. Yeah, no, I'm not interested. And of course, I was so wrong. I mean, I was thinking of that because of where I'd come from. I was a product of the 80s, of MTV, of a material girl living in a material world. I was of TV dinners, absent parents, keys bouncing around on my neck as I came home from school. But I was utterly wrong. I was hooked bad. Perching birds and plants and now everything, even spiders. Oh, spiders. I, naturalist, seek, yes. I've been thinking a lot about this notion from French philosopher Albert Camus. A person's life is nothing but this slow trek to rediscover through the detours of art those 2 or 3 great and simple images in whose presence her heart first opened. Her heart first opened. In my case, not so much an image, but a flock of birds opened my heart. Other collective nouns we could use for pigeon guillemots include bizarre, love that, and loomery, a loomery of guillemots. A bazaar of guillemots changed me forever, and I can't stop seeing, and I can't stop the hearing. I can't and don't want to hush the curiosity. I wonder about, the people, so many people around me. It seems like the zombie apocalypse is here. Where is your curiosity, I think? But then I remember I was that person too. And for me, it was this time down on the Salish Sea, working my tuchus off, learning how to teach, and feeling lonely, being alone, feeling desperate. I can't do this for 30 years. And here, I was listening to these songs. So if I'm not an environmentalist because that's a dirty word, what's the word I need? I do appreciate the concept of sustainability, but that word just doesn't do it for me. What's more, I also appreciate how Robin Wall Kimmerer interrogates that term. Isn't it just a way to keep plundering? Instead, she favors reciprocity. I like that. Conservation and stewardship don't really do it for me as well. What really turns my crank is the term coined by E.O. Wilson in 1984, biophilia. I have a bad case of it. I am seriously, low-key, literally a biophiliac. I love life. Even the way young people talk, low-key. But it's not just life as we observe it in this material world with a materialist worldview informed by the Cartesian paradigm of reason, dualism, mechanism, mathematics, and reductionism. The cosmos as a machine to be pieced and parted. I'm talking again, of course, about it. This paradigm promotes the illusion that we are somehow separate from place. Mind versus matter, person versus place. This is a fallacy, as Lanessa pointed out in her beautiful introduction. And fortunately, more and more of us are beginning to understand that. So much of our mind, after all, is in our bowels. Turns out there's something to gut feelings. Some even refer to the gut as the second mind. Just as there is no parsing mind from matter, we are home. We are our home, such that what we do to our home, we do to ourselves. This is what American philosopher, naturalist, and poet Thoreau means when he says, the least conscious and needless injury inflicted on any creature is to its extent a suicide. Thoreau gave the world the concept of civil disobedience, and I feel that in those words. For about 20 years, I had the great gift of teaching alongside a consummate scientist, an utter materialist, in Dr. Dan Stevens, a learning community at Wenatchee Valley College we called Northwest Nature Writing. We blended our teaching and our disciplines in a beautiful embodiment of consilience. But I always found myself pushing against his materialist worldview, formulating questions alongside our students. I realized that this pushing was coming from my immersion in something we call the humanities. For every time I get to be under pine boughs, in the presence of the sound of running water, or in the way of a brisk wind on a mountaintop, I feel something more than a collection of atoms in relationship to each other. I feel something more than chemistry and mathematics at work. In my teaching, I rely so much on the work of Gerard Manley Hopkins, that Jesuit priest-poet who wrote in 1877 that the world is charged with the grandeur of God, and that there lives the dearest freshness deep down things. I think about that a lot. Where is the divine? In here. And here. It is in the wildness of our earth, not in any attempt to have dominion over it. We are part of something here, not apart from it. Or really, I should say, not apart from her. They, from kin, not apart from kin. What's more, the Christian Bible doesn't say, "For God so loved humanity that he gave his only begotten Son." That's not what it says. It doesn't even say that, "For so he loved the world." In the original, in the New Testament, it says, "For God so loved the cosmos that he gave his only begotten Son." The cosmos, the harmony, the wildness, the everything, and all of us from starshine to worm glisten. Please bear with me, if you would, and I know some of you are already doing this, but I would like you to close your eyes. I can see you. It's okay. I've been there. Just close your eyes, and I want to play some music from our cosmos for about a minute. If you prefer, we could say, "For the green fire so loved the cosmos," for the Great Spirit, for Coyote, for the Waiakin, for the Alpha and Omega and some of our collective biophilia, so loved the cosmos. I'm not certain about the right word. I'm just getting as close as I can. Please pick the one that works for you. As for me, what I'm certain of is, as Wallace Stegner told us in his collection, The Sound of Mountain Water, something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed. We simply need that wild country available to us, even if we never do more than drive to its edge and look in. And I want to finish today with a little poem. And then we'll have some time for questions. A moment ago, you were following your steps across the driveway, head bent in the dusk toward one worry, then another, and the day's last chore in the plastic bag in your hand. It wasn't a sound or a touch, but something like the presence of a memory that made you stop and look up to find yourself nearly surrounded by the dim outlines of 8 or 10 deer. And here you are, still, as if you stepped through the charcoaled air into a scene on a cave wall, the thin legs, where someone long ago, the lifted, expectant head and tense breath, tried to bring you to life. Thank you. So now I'd like to open it up for any questions or dancing. Comments. Smart water. Marcy, yes, I'm with you. Lanessa.
Do you see poetry or the art you create as a way of connecting with nature?
Do I see poetry as a way of connecting with nature? Most definitely. I feel that I don't think there's any accident that I am deeply involved with poetry and am as deeply involved with wilderness, with the world, with relationships, with ecology. And I think there's a kind of wildness to both things that I love, that I need, even if I just walk to the edge of it and look in sometimes. But in making a poem, what I really love about making poems is the part of it that doesn't come from me. You know, when you're in that making state. The Greeks, those folks from the classical civilization, they were convinced that the muses filled us when we were making art, that this was the divine in us. And I see why they believe that. But also when I'm in, these places that I try to be in as much as I can, in the wilderness, I feel the same thing. I feel this other, and it's the most fascinating, beautiful, deeply true kind of experience that I know of. Just a smile or a question? You got to, okay. Yeah. Don't ever smile, okay?
By the way, I absolutely love your talk and your poetry, and I love your guide. So I was struck by your, the moment that you talked about where you started learning the names of the different birds. And it reminded me of this, it's kind of like a semi-short story by Ursula K. Le Guin called She Unnames Them. And in it, she imagines, Adam gives names to all the animals and understands them, and Eve takes all the names away, and what happens is this intimacy. So suddenly, without the names as a barrier, we're closer to everything. And I always thought that was really striking. But actually, I think you make a kind of compelling counter-argument that kind of, that's kind of how we learn initially to connect with nature, to be able to kind of name different animals. And kind of more of a comment than a question.
Oh yeah, I love that. Thank you for bringing Ursula Le Guin into the conversation. She helped shape who I am, just like those birds did. I read her deeply, throughout my life, and I've thought a lot about names, and like other things, like other paradoxes in our existence. Yeah, names can get in the way. I think that's true. But just as long as we don't stop there and we understand that there are other names for these beings, other people have names for these beings, and then what does Brown's peony call, what does she call herself? And so, yeah, thank you. Harold, Dr. Harold.
In Mark Twain's version, Adam names them badly and then Eve gives them the proper names.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's in the Lucille Clifton version, too. She has a series of Adam and Eve poems where Adam messes it up, and then as Adam's sleeping, Eve whispers the names into his ear.
So here's a question for you to think about. So you're a teacher, you've had this experience helping students develop an appreciation of poetry. I wonder if it is analogously challenging for them also to develop an appreciation of the wilderness. But maybe the wilderness is easier for them to get to than poetry. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. That reminds me of a moment out on our hike today. And I was reading this passage in the Cascadia Field guidebook, and Kelsey, that rascal, she's taken these binoculars that I loaned her, and she's looking, she's like, no, there's these deer over here. I'm looking at, no, look at the book, look at the book. And there were so many times, too, when we were out teaching our nature writing class, where we would start talking about language and introductions and, paragraphs. Oh, so exciting. And then here comes this black bear up from the creek, and okay, well, I guess we're going to not talk for a while and just experience. So I do think that the wonder of the natural world, the other than human world, is an easier sell. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I think what happened? Why did that happen in me? What, really, was it? Did I need to feel that alone, like that lonely? I was pretty lonely and kind of desperate with all that work that I was doing for teaching. I think that did help, the isolation. I think that helped.
I think one aspect is that, going back to the Greeks, I mean, of course, if you were a Greek farmer and, 3,000 years ago, you may not have experienced poetry but maybe you did. Maybe that's what entertainment was, right? We don't exactly know. But maybe if you live where there's poetry all the time, you're just really used to it, and maybe if it has kind of like a steady form, that you can just plug into it and appreciate it really naturally. Whereas also if you live in the wilderness all the time and you really get into it, you can start to really breathe it and see all this stuff. Whereas maybe we as modern Americans, we don't spend much time with poetry, and we don't spend much time in the wilderness. And so we're kind of blind link these things and depth together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. I mean, there's a reason why most states have a poet laureate, because we think that we need it. Like, you know, ambassador for poetry here. And there's a reason why we have national parks and state parks. Yeah. Yeah, Cassie.
So you and C. Marie both kind of answered this in class earlier, but I felt like your answer was just so beautiful. How does your relationship change with your environment after writing something like this?
Yeah. So when C. Marie and Liz and I made Cascadia Field Guide, we were naturalists, yes, but we didn't have all the ways of knowing all the lore at our fingertips. We had to do a lot of research too. Yes, we did bring our personal experience, our personal anecdotes and knowledge into the book, which I think is special, but we also did our research and tried to do right by the different ways of knowing that the book holds. And so, yes, it deepened our understanding of what it is to be part of place. The work on that book is behind this talk. Yeah, we hope that the purpose of the book is to reveal Cascadia as not a collection of objects, but a communion of subjects. In the words of Thomas Berry, he didn't like this term, but he was kind of an eco-theologian. Yeah, so, and certainly that's one of the main reasons to write, for all of us to write, is for what it engenders in us. Because I haven't experienced anything else. Kelsey might say art, you know, painting or something. I could buy that maybe, but writing, you know, making poems and how that honors the individual life, the scintillant moments that each of us holds inside us, even as I speak. Wow. And I see that too as an antidote to the screen life. With the screen life, it's not a simple answer. We all need screens, just like we, you know, most of us, I mean, that we need them. It's like we need a little gasoline now and then and so forth. But like the screen life, it just seems like there's the shallowing of experience to me. And, you know, I have daughters that are your age and lots of students, and a shallowing, and also a message that says, you know, what's going on in here right now doesn't count for much. But when we make poems, when we sit down with language, and when we, you know, it's like, I think like the best kind of prayer isn't saying something you want. It's just being present and listening. And when you sit still and you listen to those quieter voices in you, the magic happens. Hey.
I have a question for you. Have you ever read the Quran or listened to like the Arabic Quran?
What's that?
Have you ever read the Quran or listened to the Arabic Quran?
Yes, I have read part of it, and I've also read part of the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just curious.
Oh, yeah. I used to teach world literature, and it was marvelous to dip into all those beautiful texts, and at the the basis of every religion that I know of is poetry and stories. And, this is, I think part of why we have Poets Laureate, and why, we think we need more of it. We're not, although, it really is everywhere. If you think about 77 years ago, our fathers set forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created, and so forth. The myth was that he wrote that on the train on the way to Gettysburg, Lincoln. No, he crafted that prose poem over weeks, drafts and drafts of it. I have a dream that one day, young boys and girls, that I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. That's a poem. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. That's a little poem in me that when I heard those words, when I read that, I never forgot them. And then Hozier, Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift. I know she's on the out right now, but hey, Taylor, she's T-Swizzle. She can write. Yeah.
So I noticed you bring up the term like Wyatt and coyote, and I was wondering if Native American culture has ever helped you deepen your relationship or knowledge with nature.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And definitely through reading people like Robin Wall Kimmerer, and through my friendship with C. Marie, and reading other Native writers, for sure. Yeah, that has shaped who I am. And it was one of the things that we wanted to honor in Cascadia Field Guide. And so, especially thanks to C. Marie, who had edited a book called Native Voices, which collected Native writers from around the country, the only anthology of Native literature that includes craft essays on the craft, natives on the craft of writing poetry. She was especially helpful at accessing the Native community, and we tried to center on them and center their voices in this collection. And we have a lot of them, and they're everywhere. These Native visions. They're with me right now. And 4 of the 14 artists in the book are Native as well. Yeah, thank you for that question. Marcy.
As you were talking, I couldn't help but think of the work of Martin Buber in his work on the I, thou, and the I, it, when you were talking about the language of it. Mm-hmm. And I know he sort of argues that we're constantly in the I, it as opposed to the I, thou, and we should strive for that relationship of the I, thou, or the I, you, instead of the I, it. And I'm wondering to what extent, and he also believes that you can have that relationship with nature as well. And so I'm wondering to what extent the relationship with nature may foster the relationship with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that.
Exactly. I know that I became a more compassionate person to other people when those guillemots first cracked my heart. And in my experience, when you can love, that first love cracks you open, then it just keeps going. If you let it. And so the biophilia wasn't just confined to seabirds. And yeah, even humans. I even love humans. Human animals, the two-leggeds. Yeah, that's well said.
Thank you.
Well, all right, I think, are we good, Doctor? Okay. Thank you so much for your attention, for your questions, for being here, and that beautiful introduction.